Hello everybody, welcome to this first hangout of the PBL-MOOC. We've seen already some activity on the discussion forum. Of course, we do not have any indication of what you're all doing in the teams, but we hope that a similar kind of activity is going on there. Let's first introduce myself and the other members that are taking part in this hangout. I'm Geraldine Klaarbout, working at University of Maastricht. My expertise lies in e-learning, instructional design, and educational technology. My other co-instructors are Danielle and Herco, but they will introduce themselves. Danielle, go ahead.
Well, hello all. My name is Danielle Verstegen. I work at Maastricht University in an educational department in the e-learning group. You've probably seen my face around because I'm also a leader of the project team that has developed this MOOC. And I will try to say a bit more about that later. Herco?
Good afternoon from a very windy Oslo. Sitting in a terrace. It's rather freezing here, but yeah, I'm here to talk you through some of the aspects in this MOOC. I'm an associate professor of psychology, and I work at Maastricht University at PBL and Geraldine, over to you.
Okay, thank you both. Herco, there's a lot of wind behind you. So now you'll know a little bit more about us. We are going to do a number of things in this hangout, but first of all I want to give you some instruction on how you can pose questions while we are live, and that's by going on top of your screen. On the right top there's a button with Q&A, and if you open this you can post a question. We will see the question on our screen and we will try to answer in an oral way. For the rest, the structure of this hangout. So first, Danielle will give you some history, why this MOOC was constructed and who was involved. Next, Herco, if there's not too much wind, will go into more detail on working in groups and the roles you take, and then I'll end this session with a reflection on what's going on the discussion forum. You can ask your questions during the whole session. If you do not watch this session live, we will in any case post a link to the recorded session on the platform. You can always ask some questions in the discussion forum as well. Danielle, I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, it's my task today to tell you something about how we started on this endeavor. In our e-learning group, we had, of course, seen the rise of MOOCs with interest. We followed a few MOOCs with mixed experiences, I'd say. And then about a year and a half ago, we got a message from the executive board of Maastricht University, who said they would like the university to gain first-hand experience with MOOCs, to keep leading and learning, to keep up to date, but also, I think, to start up the internal discussion of what Maastricht University should do with MOOCs and what they should not do with MOOCs. So Jeroen van Meringboer and I collected a group of colleagues from different faculties to develop these plans further. And I think that's one of the most pleasant aspects of this project for me, is that we work together with a university-wide team on this project. We started up discussions and there were some givens. The board had said the topic had to be in the field of education, education or learning, and it had to be in line with Maastricht University's concepts of learning. They asked for a university-wide project where a MOOC would be developed and research would be done in parallel. One of the first things that we as a project team agreed on was that problem-based learning then would be a suitable topic. It's at the core of our educational vision, and it's also a topic that all the faculties can contribute to. We considered far more specialist topics, but they are only relevant for one faculty or for one field. But if you want to do a MOOC about problem-based learning, we thought it would be very strange to go for a very traditional concept, something with lectures and study material and very information delivery type of MOOC. So we decided to try to follow problem-based learning principles as far as possible. Learning about problem-based learning by doing it, that was our slogan. That was what we tried to do. It was the start of many discussions because, of course, we did have to compromise. We simply cannot do in an online MOOC what we do in face-to-face settings with small groups of students and tutors. So in the end, is this problem-based learning or not? That's a point that is open for discussion. Is it possible to do PBL in MOOCs? For us, another point that is open for discussion. In the end, I think I'm very excited about this project, not because I think that MOOCs will suddenly change the educational world. I'm old enough to remember that we thought that videos would change everything. But I can see the attraction. There's in MOOCs a range of topics that you can choose from. You can choose times and places that you like. You have complete freedom in deciding what you do with whom, how much energy you put in. And that's very far away from what we do in our bachelor's and master's, where everything is linear and almost the same for all students. So I'm interested to see what we can do and how we can use MOOCs, but in a more innovative way than many of them are now. That's a bit of history about the project.
Okay, thank you. You can, just a small reminder, you can always ask questions by clicking on the Q&A button, and then we'll try to answer them. Herko, you were going to tell something about working in groups and group roles. I give you the floor.
Okay, I hope the audio is okay. Yeah, well, for many of you, this will be a first experience with virtual teamwork, or at least trying to work together with people online from distance. And since you're now in the MOOC for over a week, I suggest that you get to know each other, the other people in your team, and start discussing what to do to make this collaboration work and make it a success. Many of you have given a name to your team. That's one thing of identifying with who you are as a group, but it's good to talk about your expectations from this MOOC, about your availability. Are you able to collaborate for the entire duration of the MOOC, or will you be missing a few weeks? Share your preferred work styles. Do you like to work in the morning or in the evening? Are you someone who tends to procrastinate or do things immediately? What are your abilities or your strengths and the strengths and weaknesses you can offer to the team? These things will help you get an idea of what to expect from your fellow teammates and possibly help you perform better as a team. You should also talk about the channels you will be using to send material around. Are you YouTubers, or do you use Skype, Facebook, Google+? What are your preferred ways of sending materials to one another? And then maybe more difficult issues like what will you do with poorly performing team members? Or in a positive way, how do you reward people who bring in the things that you really like? And finally, of course, you have to think about dividing the work. And you can think about all doing the same thing, but you could also, well, exploit the fact that some of you may have access to the literature and others do not. Or, for instance, in what is known as pedagogy, people like Howard Rheingold have described ways of working together, and he thought about, well, distinguishing between searchers and contextualizers and summarizers. So some of you may be digitally literate and you know your way around the web, so you can offer to collect material, while others might go deeper into the links that the searchers have found and contextualize it by adding a description to these links. Someone else might say, well, I prefer to summarize the things that are collected by others, and yet others can say, well, I'd like to keep track between the relations and ideas that we produce over the course of the MOOCs. Well, it's up to you, but the important thing is to discuss these things in the beginning of the MOOC, and hopefully you get a better understanding of what you can expect from one another. Because well, virtual teams they can outperform face-to-face teams, but usually that happens in the short run, because after a while it can be difficult to sustain the performance because you miss all this energizing face-to-face interaction. So that is something to prepare for. That you may now be in a team where you trust each other, but after a while that trust may go out the window when, for instance, your communication patterns are not very predictable. That when you send out a message and no one responds within a couple of days, or when you ask for feedback and you don't get adequate feedback. So these things are important in order to make it to the end of the MOOC, and so it would be good for the team to have a discussion on these kinds of issues and make promises. This pilot will be, well, it will not be a very culturally diverse group of people involved. We're all from Maastricht with similar backgrounds, similar access to literature, so probably we won't have issues that come up in teams where, well, in virtual teams you get something like social equalization, things, because you miss information on the environment in which people are operating. You tend to get very well, it's likely that you end up making what psychologists call fundamental attribution errors. That is, when something goes wrong, we blame the person and not the environment in which he or she is working. In virtual environments, this can happen because, especially in different cultures, we don't know what the circumstances are in which the people work. So, although you're all from Maastricht and maybe most of you know each other, you still have to be aware that if you don't know someone intimately or have worked for them face to face, you still might end up thinking that someone is, for instance, unwilling or incapable of really participating well. So this lack of information, because we're working together virtually, is something you have to take into account. And in other words, try to be friendly and have an open and positive attitude towards what other people are trying to do, and try to keep your promises. Basically, that's my first contribution on what it is to work in a team, and I hope it will work out wonderfully for all the people who are joining us now. Geraldine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Henko. I think it was an interesting reflection also from your part. Then we come to the posts on the discussion forum, or elements that we found interesting to see happening over there. I'm sure you also had a lot of interesting discussions within your team. If we look at these discussion forums, we see kind of 4 things that come up. And the first one is one that Daniela also addressed already, or where there have already been some discussion when designing this MOOC, is whether it's indeed possible to have a PBL environment within a MOOC. Can it be a similar learning environment? And I think we are intrigued as you are by this question. And as Daniela already indicated, it's like you can formulate this question similar to like when the radio came up, or when the video came up, or when the computer came up. And we do nothing that's an interesting question, but we do want to see whether it is possible and what are the elements that contribute to this success or perhaps to its failure. That's still to be determined. And then it becomes a more an instructional design question. What can we do when we want to use a MOOC? Because there are a lot of possibilities. You open your borders, you can address a lot of people. What can you do in order to make it a successful learning environment? As well for the learners, for the students, as for the instructors that are taking part or that are designing the environment. A second aspect that, well, it's a little bit related, of course, is like a comment that we designed this environment, this MOOC, similar to a classroom-based approach by fixing the tracks, fixing the problems you work on, by fixing the time period in which you have to work on this. And the question was raised whether it wouldn't be more PBL or more interesting when you can choose your problem you want to work on, and whether you look for others who are also interesting to go ahead with you and to work on this problem. I think it's an interesting issue, and I think from a motivational perspective, you may be right to do so. But it also requests a lot of self-regulation of a learner and discipline to go ahead, and I think there you may have some problems. And a reason to go from purely online learning environments to a MOOC, which is limited in time, is to make sure that dropout rates may decrease. Although we know you have a massive open online course, which is still not the case in this pilot, but of course we do hope to achieve this in the real run. And by limiting in time, you give some structure to a learner. Additionally, I think if you make it open and you do not give any limitations anymore, it becomes hard for an instructor to come in to coach or to guide the students. Of course, you can say, I pose a problem on the internet and I look for peers that want to go ahead, and we do not need any instructors. That may be the case. I think that's an interesting discussion and some interesting, I would like to have some feedback from your part to see when you go through this MOOC what your needs are with respect to guidance and coaching in this online learning environment. The third issue that I noticed was the kind of students you attract. Whether when you do an online learning environment, you perhaps create a safe learning environment for a specific type of student, a student who does not like to pose questions in a face-to-face environment or in a large group environment, and who feels like this is a safe environment where you can pose questions because there's kind of a distance. And I'm wondering whether this is indeed the case, or whether this is for a limited number the case or not. So I think it's also interesting to know from you whether you kind of behave differently because you're in this environment and there's some kind of distance between your peers, between the instructors. You do not have to meet us in real life or not. And a fourth part, and it's already a little bit addressed with the limitation in time from the MOOC, is indeed what the role, and it's a track within the MOOC, what the role of a tutor can be in PBL, but more specifically also in a MOOC environment. How do you see this? What can this mean for a group? Is it something you miss when you work in a team or not? Do you really need it, or is it sufficient that you have kind of 3 instructors who follow the discussion board and where you can ask some questions, but they are not really acting as a tutor? I think it's a specific, interesting question for the track on the tutor in a PBL environment. These are kind of my reflection on the discussion forum. I'll just check. I don't see any questions yet. I'll just check with Daniela and Herco whether they have some additions, and I'll start with Daniela.
No, I think you've summarized what we've been discussing, and it's one of the nice things is to see that questions or discussions that we had in our project team also return here while we're doing this pilot. Yeah.
Thank you. Herco, do you still?
No, nothing further from Oslo. Thank you.
Okay then. Well, it's also for us the first tryout with a hangout session also on this, so we would like to have some discussion on, of course, the content, the questions that are raised here, but for us it also would be interesting to know whether this kind of Google Hangout is helpful, is supportive, whether you feel more, because some of the comments were also the visibility of the instructor, whether this makes us more visible than you expected. I think we wish you all a lot of success within the MOOC, and well, we'll meet on a new moment that will be announced through the platform for a new Google Hangout. Thank you very much. Bye.